And let's start with the cold, hard numbers, because on paper, this was never a fair fight. Pre-war, the Russian Aerospace Forces, or VKS, boasted an active fleet of over 4,000 aircraft. This included hundreds of their most advanced jets, the Su-35 Flanker, a master of air-to-air combat, the Su-34 Fullback, a potent fighter bomber, and the versatile Su-30. They had recent combat experience from their intervention in Syria and had supposedly spent years modernizing. In contrast, Ukraine had perhaps 100 operational Soviet-era jets. The expectation was a swift, overwhelming air campaign that would leave Ukraine blind, deaf, and defenseless. To understand why that didn't happen, we first need to understand the rule book, the very doctrine of air war. And here, Russia and the West play by two completely different sets of rules. Western and NATO doctrine, perfected since the Gulf War, prioritizes one thing above all else: air superiority. Before you do anything else, you dominate the sky. The first wave of any campaign is a mission called SEAD, suppression of enemy air defenses. You use stealth aircraft, electronic warfare jets, and long-range missiles to systematically hunt down and destroy every enemy radar, every air defense missile launcher on the ground. And only when you own the skies do you then bring in your bombers and your ground attack aircraft to support the army. Of course, keeping any enemy air force at a distance so that they can't interdict and affect that. It is a methodical top-down approach. Russian doctrine, however, is fundamentally different. It has its roots in the Soviet era, where the Air Force is often seen as a tool of the army, essentially a flying artillery. Its primary job isn't to control the whole of the sky, but to directly support the ground troops advancing below. They rely heavily on their own ground-based air defense systems to protect their forces, creating a protective bubble. This doctrinal difference is the single most important reason for what happened next. In the opening days, Russia didn't launch a coordinated SEAD campaign, and the opening days were Russia trying to take Kyiv, coming in from the north and from the northeast, focusing on Kyiv, focusing on Kyiv Homstel Airport. They didn't systematically hunt Ukraine's air defenses. Instead, they followed their doctrine. They supported a massive ground invasion. We saw this most dramatically at the assault on Homstel Airport just outside Kyiv. Russia sent in dozens of helicopters in a daring air assault. This was how you would expect to take a capital city, coming in to take the Homstel airfield. But they flew directly into a hornet's nest of Ukrainian air defenders who were waiting for them. The Russians hadn't suppressed them. They hadn't used their air force to protect the ground, to put an air defense bubble that they owned around the airspace over Kyiv and elsewhere. The Russian helicopters were flying into a trap. Russian jets flew low-level bombing runs, but without proper intelligence. They often used unguided dumb bombs, flying predictable routes, and they were picked off by the Ukrainian fighters and ground-based missiles. It was a shocking underperformance, a direct result of a doctrine that failed to appreciate the resilience and sophistication of Ukraine's defences. Of course, it helped Ukraine that they'd been pre-warned as to what the Russians were doing. So how did Ukraine shield hold? They executed a textbook integrated air defense system, or IADS. Think of it as a multi-layered net. At low altitude, you have thousands of soldiers with shoulder-fired missiles like the Stinger and mobile gun systems like the German Gepard, lethal to helicopters and low-level flying jets. In the mid-tier, you have systems like NASAMS, capable of knocking down cruise missiles and drones. And at the very top, you have the long-range systems, Ukraine's own Soviet-era S-300s and the game-changing US Patriot. Crucially, Ukrainian commanders were brilliant. They never kept their systems only in one place. They constantly moved their missile launchers, a tactic known as shoot and scoot, making them incredibly difficult for Russia to find and destroy. Aided by pinpoint intelligence from NATO, they created a deadly, invisible web that Russia's air force simply could not break through.